Hello, welcome back to ITB Analytics. I'm Geoff Mosher. We have our analytics expert, Sam Finkel, joining us. And as we promised here in part 2 of a podcast series, we're going to talk about the bargain shopping the Eagles have done, a bargain shopping spree, as I like to call it. A cynical person might say the Eagles have been shopping at Walmart, while like the Patriots and Cardinals were at, Neiman Marcus. But hey, this is what the Eagles are doing. There's a reason behind it. We've talked about this on Inside the Birds podcasts, and you do have to give Howie credit. There have been some misses on the one-year deals in the past, but there have also been some really big hits on the one-year deals. If anything, Sam, most of these guys are being signed to compete for a spot on the team, to be depth. If you get a starter out of it, you're really happy, but it leaves the Eagles in a position where they don't have to reach for a position in the draft. And as Howie always likes to say, and I totally agree with it, free agency doesn't stop just because you and I are doing this podcast and we're going to talk about a bunch of guys, right? It goes on all the way. There's the trade market. There's the May, June late market that doesn't count against the comp pick formula. And then, of course, there's, like I said, the trades not only now, but leading up into the season. And then, of course, the trade deadline.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, even last year, nobody expected Zach Bond to have the role that he did. So I think that's a perfect example.
Right.
You never know what you're getting. And the Eagles took a lot of risks with these guys because, well, actually, it's not really that much risk, but they took guys that were, on the bubble of their career, right? They're either not performing at a starter level or they were starters at the beginning of their career and they've fallen off. So they're taking some chances on guys, and that's what's kind of be exciting to see.
Hey, sometimes the scale gets. I mean, nobody expected Zach Bond to be as great as he was. I don't think a lot of people expected Devin White to not make the team. So I mean, it's
me
just
included.
How it works.
Honestly, I admit that I thought he was going to have a pretty significant role on the team. So,
all right, well, let's talk about some of these, bargain shopping commodities the Eagles have brought in. We'll start off with AJ Dillon, who signed a one-year deal, and I don't know if Adam and I have gone through the contract on him yet, but
I don't know if we've seen the number yet, at least at this point of recording. Which you want to know a little trick that I've found out, and maybe you could confirm it.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have a contract number published immediately or close to, it's a bad deal for the player typically.
100%. When the agents don't go out of their way to tell the reporter what the guaranteed money is, it usually means A, there's very little or no guaranteed money, or B, yeah, it's very, very team friendly deal. So you'd have to assume that then you go just look at the market for one-year players at a position and figure it's something in that neighborhood. So yeah, not a lot of money for AJ Dillon would be, especially coming off of a year in which he missed the entire season from neck stingers that were pretty severe. He didn't play at all in 2024. So yeah, you can imagine that this is low money. And again, a lot of these guys, no matter what their name was or where they drafted, they're not guaranteed to make the team. That's why their contract is what it is. But when we talk about AJ Dillon, a big 240-pound running back, Sam, who we've talked about on other podcasts, me and Adam, he actually catches the ball better than you would think for a guy who's 240 pounds. He's not, though, a replacement for Kenny Gainwell. This is not a 2-minute, 4-minute drill back, or at least he hasn't been. Pass protection's okay. It's not, doesn't really, jump out at you like the way it was for Gainwell. He's not going to return, play all of these special teams like Gainwell did. So different role, but a good person to have, because if Barkley gets hurt, he can be a good first and second down running back.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I put on this report, right? I said very different running back than Kenny Gainwell. Surprisingly, pretty similar production.
Mm-hmm.
And he'll probably be competing for the RB2 role, but more realistically, a situational third, like RB3. If Barkley, can't play for whatever reason, I think you're absolutely right that he could step in that role.
All right, cool. So what else jumps out from an analytics standpoint?
Yeah, so I did compare him to Gainwell just because I think that's where the production it needs to be replaced, right? So even though they are completely different players and have completely different styles of running the ball, I think the production that Gainwell created, however he creates that production, right? Whether it's he's a little bit more shifty as opposed to a bruiser like AJ Dillon, that production still needs to be replaced. So I feel like they're fair to compare in that way, maybe not physically.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, his yards per attempt to Gainwell for career is pretty similar. So a little bit worse. It's 4.1 when Gainwell's is 4.3.
Mm-hmm.
But what you've seen is AJ Dillon's career is it's consistently been going down. So right when he started, he was 5.2, then 4.3, then 4.1, then 3.4.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit concerning. And that's probably why his market wasn't, besides not playing last year, obviously, is not as strong. But Gainwell was kind of a little bit all over the place. His yards per attempt were 4.3, 4.9, 4.2, and 3.8. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't all just going down. There was one year it went up, but you see a similar decline. And maybe that's just the nature of the running back position or the nature of the snaps that they're getting.
Well, if I may, I will say that I think guys like Dillon and Gainwell tend to be all over the map because they excel in short yardage situations. So there's probably a lot of 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, goal line carries for these two guys in particular that probably skewed the average a little bit.
You're absolutely right, especially because especially for Dillon, that is his role, right? He was a lot of the times the goal line guy,
Yep.
short yardage guy, and we did use Gainwell, or the Eagles used Gainwell in a very similar way. And I think looking at the average touchdowns per season is also an interesting way to do it. So AJ Dillon had 4.25 on average, and Gainwell had 3.25 on average.
Mm,
So one touchdown greater. And I think that's just the nature of how AJ Dillon was used in the Green Bay offense.
got it. All right, let's move on to the edge rusher, Josh Uche out of Michigan. Couple of years with the Patriots, who drafted him in the 2nd round. They traded him to the Chiefs. The Chiefs just could not find a use for him. They inactivated him for 4 of the last 5 games, and the only game he played was that meaningless season finale against the Broncos, and then he was inactive for the postseason. He's sort of a weird case, Sam. I wasn't I was lukewarm on the sign. I get it. 1 year, less than $2 million, really nothing to lose there. He has traits, though, and Greg Cosell has talked about his traits are worth gambling on a bargain deal like this.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie, it feels a lot like the Bryce Huff situation with a lot less risk.
Yes,
I
that's
think
fair.
that's the best way to say it, because you're not putting as much capital into draft and money otherwise, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing that with Uche, but what you're doing with him is you're putting a lot of very little money, but he has a very similar track record to Bryce Huff, I'd say, in terms of at least win percentage, which I think is a really important statistic for the edge. And that being said, I feel like I wanted to take a second to compare his platform season to Sweat's platform season, which obviously skews in favor of Sweat.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the league rank, for each of them, Sweat blows him out of the water in every single one, right? So he has more sacks per game, more quarterback hits, more hurries, more total pressures per game, and a higher. And then the only thing he doesn't have is a higher win percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only statistic that
And that was pretty close too. Whereas the other categories are just so lopsided, this one was close.
Sure, within 1 percentage point.
Right.
So, Uche had 14.9% win rate, and Sweat had a 14% win rate.
What does it typically say from an analytics standpoint about a player who has a good win percentage at 14.9, but has alarmingly low sacks per game and total pressures per game? Because someone's going to say, how is it that you're winning your one-on-ones yet creating no hurries, no pressures, no sacks?
So for him, in very specifically him, is he just didn't play that many games.
Mhm.
I mean, he played 13, which is a decent amount, but he just didn't have as much snaps, and he's a very situational guy. And the same thing with Bryce Huff, right? They only come in certain situations, so you
Mhm.
can have as high of a win rate as you want, but as you can get, right? And if you're not on the field very often, it's not going to convert, right? Because 14.9% is a high number relative to the entire league, but if you're only playing 100 snaps, you're only getting there 14.9 times out of
Mhm.
100.
Right.
When opposed to playing 1,000 snaps, you're getting there 140 times. So
Sure.
that I think is the biggest difference. So I think the snap count is the big difference.
What did you discern and by the way, this will be on the website for anybody who wants to see it visually, InsideTheBirds.com. What did you discern from Josh Uche's career? You have year by year, 2000, 2021, 22, 23, 24, and clearly in 2022, it's like he was a different person. It's 12 sacks, win rate almost at 20% compared to every other year that he's played. It's sort of fascinating to me.
Yeah, I mean, they did something. They played him a lot more, first off, and second off, they used him in situations where he would be successful. I don't know why they went away from that, whether it was they had talent that they could put in or whatever. He was in a decent amount less snaps,
Right.
which I can probably get for us too.
Right. It did feel like when they traded Judon to the Falcons, they just expected that Josh Uche would slide in there and make up for that production, and it didn't happen.
Yeah, it's definitely a gamble that did not pay off for the Patriots for sure.
Yeah. His win rate is positive at 15.38 total career. This is career, but that's sort of skewed by the one season at 19, whereas 11 the next season, 14.9 last season. Again, we talked about that, pretty good, even though he's not producing sacks and pressures. 13.2 in his second year. As a rookie, it was 18.5, but he only played 9 games, so that skewed a little bit. It's very weird to see that his average is decent at 15% win rate, but then his career average for total pressures and sacks are just alarmingly low.
Yeah, I mean, he apparently can win in the line, he just can't finish.
Really
And
interesting stuff.
I think comparing that to Sweat's, right? Sweat's entire career was 12.41% on average.
Right. So he's 3 points higher, basically, Josh Uche than Sweat as far as win rate.
But I would caution you because Bryce Huff had an even higher win rate in his career at 18.24%.
Wow. That's
So
right.
I think it really comes. It's again, these numbers can differ so much depending on how often they get in the game, right?
Right.
And so you'd like to extrapolate and say if you did put him in, X plus, like 1,000 snaps in the season, you would still have that success. When in reality, that's just not how statistics work.
Right.
And
Interesting, by the way, to your point, that Bryce Huff and Uche have the exact same career sacks per game metric at 0.32 compared to Sweat, who is almost at 0.5.
right, which is a huge difference. I mean, Sweat is a finisher, and Sweat is on the field a lot more.
Right.
And I think what you hope for is you get a situational guy, and you can either use him in situations where he'll be successful, or you hope he develops into a guy that can play a lot more robust role on the team, which obviously did not happen with Huff.
There you go. Patrick Johnson, we don't have to spend too much time on because he's really a special teams player. He's a backup edge. He had a great camp and made the team off that. He had a better camp than Bryce Huff. As far as being a pass rusher and really causing havoc, had a good preseason. But as you've noted here, I mean, his overall, and again, it's not a lot of games because he hasn't played a lot of snaps, but nothing really outstanding about his win percentage, his pressures per game numbers, his sacks per game, of course, is at 0. But yeah, he's in the red on the win percentage and total pressures per game, but that's really not what they ask him to do.
Right. And I think as a special team standout, he has found a lot of success. And if you need to use him, he's serviceable.
All right. Let's talk about the tight ends. They bring in Harrison Bryant, the former Browns and Raiders tight end, and Kylen Granson from the Colts. The whole Dallas Goedert situation is in limbo. We've reported that they've given him permission to seek a trade. We'll see if he winds up getting traded. I think it's fairly likely he will, but you never can tell. There's a chance he's not. These two pieces that they signed, Bryant and Granson, are absolutely not to be considered Dallas Goedert replacements. But I do think the Bryant one, Sam, is interesting only because I think he's sort of got miscast in his NFL as maybe a number 2 or a blocking tight end. But, his last year at FAU, the guy went over 1,000 yards, won the Mackey Award. I mean, there was certainly pass catching acumen there in him in college and why he was picked in the 4th round.
Yeah, and I think they tried to do that, try to use him that way in at least 2021 and 2022. They tried it. I don't know why they necessarily shied away from it. I know obviously he left the Browns and went to the Raiders around that time period. But he really does have a pretty decent yards per reception throughout his career. I mean, he, as a rookie, had 9.9. In 2021, he had a career high of 11.1. Then he had 7.7 in 2022, which was his career low, but he had the highest volume of receptions and targets. So, and then it just goes to 8.6 and 9.6 after that. But I was just gonna say he does have capabilities as a pass catcher.
And as a blocker, I think that's what you have here, PB snaps as far as pass block. How many snaps are pass blocking snaps, and what his pressure percentage was as far as pressure allowed when he's pass blocking?
Sure. And I just want to take a second and say, like, tight ends do a lot in run blocking, right? That there's a lot of, value created by a tight end in run blocking. The problem is there's no good metric right now, at least at this time of recording, for measuring your value as a run blocker.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple that are okay, but it's hard to take what you do as like an individual. It's more of a reflection of your team because everybody's blocking together. There's really hard to get value and figure out where you are relative to your peers as a run blocker.
Right.
So I had to use pass blocking, which, as you can see, and as you will see on the written version of this, is we don't ask the Eagles don't ask their tight ends to pass block as much as maybe some other teams.
Right.
So when you look at it, Harrison Bryant has the same pressure allowed percentage that the entire Eagles 2024 output team did on average.
Right.
And to be honest with you, there was only 66 pass blocking attempts by the tight end room in 2024.
God, it's like 4 per game.
Right. And so it's real. I wanted to, capture the value they have as blockers. And I'm not sure this is necessarily the best way to do it, but it's a metric that we can use and kind of take that metric for what it is and know that they do a lot more than just pass blocking. Obviously, pass blocking is not something that was asked a lot from this particular group.
Got it. So, and just to reiterate, Bryant's pressure percentage as a pass blocker in those few snaps that he does it was equivalent to what the combined Eagles 2024 pressure. When you talk about Goddard, Calcaterra, Jenkins, Uzama, all of them contributing to those 4 per game.
What's interesting is it was all Calcaterra that allowed the pressure.
Yeah, I was going to say, and a lot of that was skewed by Calcaterra, right? Because everybody else was at a very, very, very low, like a 0, basically. Yeah. Goddard, no pressure allowed. Jenkins, no pressure allowed. Uzama, no pressure allowed. Good stuff. Granson is really not someone who's going to be asked to block a whole lot. I mean, the Eagles, like you said, don't ask their tight ends to stay in and block, but if they do, Granson probably not going to be that guy if he makes the team anyway. He is a catching tight end.
Absolutely. And you can see that in statistics, right? He has a pretty decent volume of targets, and he's still managing to get over 9.5 yards per reception every year of his career. So nice. He seems to have the ability to, create yards per reception. It's pretty impressive. The one thing is, though, he's only had 1 touchdown in his entire career. So he can create yards, but he doesn't seem to score, at least in the capacity that he was with the Colts.
Well, he probably played with 6 different quarterbacks in his 4 years with the Colts, right? So I'm sure that was hard to get any rhythm established there.
For sure. And plus there were so many tight ends that the Colts had. They had like 5 or 6 guys that they kept rotating throughout his career. So
right. So moving on to Adoree Jackson, the cornerback veteran that we talked about, Sam, his deal at 1 year, less than $3 million. I mean, this is got to be considered a steal for the Eagles because of what the model projection market is for a cornerback, an outside corner in the league. It's closer to $8 million, right?
Yeah. So the model that I had project Adoree Jackson's resume and performance in his platform year, which was last season, as higher than average. So like an average corner was around like 6.5 million. and it projected his value at $7.5 million, or just around, which is 2.71% of the cap. So getting Adoree Jackson at $2.5 million creates excess value for the Eagles at around $5 million value, assuming that Adoree Jackson is on the field and he can produce at the level that he did last season.
Mm.
It's much like, you know, buying a used car, right? So everybody has these prices in their heads, right? But just because you buy it at a used car dealership, right, you can get excess value if you can find bargains.
Right.
And that's what it seems like. I think you said it perfectly. The Eagles are bargain hunting. And
Mhm.
so when you can find a guy that, and again, my model is not the end all be all. I wish it was. That'd be really cool. Maybe one day. But basically, at least in my model's projection, the Eagles are getting $5 million in excess value on the deal that they reached.
And from a metric performance standpoint, what jumped out?
So what jumped out is interesting is his yards per target. So I felt a good way to analyze Adoree Jackson was to look at the output of the Eagles corner room in 2024. So the average yards per target that the Eagles corner room, and that's everybody. That's Cooper, that's Quinion, that's Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, Eli Ricks, Ringo, and Avonte Maddox, who Avonte Maddox, like we said, is not signed at this point. But that aggregate of those guys allowed 8.85 yards per target. And Adoree Jackson allowed 7.06.
And even last year alone is 6.24. 706 is his career, right?
Yeah, that's his career. Yeah, I apologize. And then 6.24 for that season. So it's even better, even stronger.
It is. Although, as your data shows, in times where he's been a starter and played more snaps, that number has obviously been higher. It's been 10.48 in 2020. It was 9.18 in 2023. So if you take individual seasons where he's probably had more responsibility, he's a little higher than the 8.85 of what the Eagles did last year.
Absolutely. He's a situational guy too. I don't think Eagles fans should expect him to step in and be like a Slay role. If anything, it's more probably similar to what Rodgers did, or maybe even Maddox. And then that's kind of the role you're filling there. So I don't think this signing solves the cornerback, the outside corner situation,
right,
for the Eagles at all. But it gives another piece that you have that you can rotate, and that's what I think is kind of interesting.
He used to be a returner, by the way, in his career. He's not going to be doing that, but the Eagles did bring in Avery Williams, who has this I know you made the joke he's sort of the Travis Hunter, right? Because he played running back and defensive back for the Falcons during his career, but he really is a return specialist. And the Eagles, without Covey right now, and with Vic Fangio probably strangling Howie if he ever plans to make Cooper DeJean a punt returner again, the Eagles needed somebody. And Ainias Williams is obviously going to be in year 2. And I would think Ainias will get a really good look to get that, but you have to have somebody to push him. You have to have depth. So they bring this kid Avery Williams in. What jumps out from him?
Well, like you said, he had one start at corner and one start at running back. That is insane. Just at an NFL level, I think that's just a fun thing to say.
Absolutely.
But what really jumped out is his yards per punt return was at 10.7. And if you look at the Eagles average in 2024, and we looked at everybody who had more than like 3 returns, I think I cut it off there because the list kept going on, but that's Cooper DeJean, Kenny Gainwell, Isaiah Rodgers, Will Shipley, and Britton Covey.
Right.
And again, some of them do more kick return than punt return, but I think what he brings is he has a higher than the Eagles average at punt return.
Right.
But he has a lower than average kick return. So that Eagles group had 26.8 yards per kickoff return, and Avery Williams on his career averaged 22.4. Now, last year he was at 27.2. And I think that's an important distinction, right? That he had his career year last year, and that maybe that's what the Eagles saw, and part of the reason they want to take a chance on him.
Right. It will be interesting to see who's in the mix at kick return. You know, obviously, without Kenny Gainwell, Will Shipley could get in the mix there. This guy, Avery Williams, I don't know. Nobody is right now jumping out at me as another potential candidate for that. But those are two interesting ones there.
I agree.
All right, great stuff. Did you want to get into the quick, the projected comp picks?
Yeah,
next year.
I won't complicate this too much. It's a really complicated formula that brings a lot of variables in, bearing on like salary, playing time, awards, etc. We can, if anyone's interested, maybe we go more in depth on that. But it is really complicated and nuanced. Basically, the max you can get is 4 comp picks, and the Eagles at this point in time are projected to get all 4 comp picks. They're going to, based on over the cap, they're going to get a 3rd rounder from Milton Williams, a 4th rounder for Josh Sweat, a 5th rounder for Mekhi Becton, and a 6th for Isaiah Rodgers.
All right. And even though there's a whole cancellation process, but because of the contracts that they've been signing, these 1-year deals with not a lot of guaranteed money up front, I don't think, and none of these 4 guys will clearly be canceled out by those.
Yeah, they shouldn't be. And I don't expect them to make any more signings that will cancel these guys out. But if that's the case, they'll have 12 picks in the 2026 draft.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Like we said, Howie has a short-term plan combined with a long-term plan. So really interesting stuff there, Sam. Thank you so much for taking the time to put that data together in this 2-part series. I feel like our audience is, as we always strive to do, more educated about the data, the analytics, and how that parlays into what the Eagles are doing from a roster construction standpoint. So thanks again for all your work.
Of course.
All right. For Sam Finkel, I'm Geoff Mosher. You've been watching a special edition of ITB Analytics.